Matching outfits, but those girls never came back and said, you know, this was hard for me.
Nyshell, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited about our conversation today. Not just because of the topic, but because of how we tried to do this a couple years ago. I think it may have been, what, 4 years ago?
It may have been longer than that. maybe five. Maybe five.
And we tried to have this conversation on Good Girl Radio about some things that you were going through, and I think they were probably very fresh, you know, on your heart. And I remember specifically being in the studio, and I believe your mom was there, your dad was there, and we were literally ready to hit the record button. And I don't know if it was you, or if it was me, or if it was one of your parents. It was just like some type of hesitancy, some tension there. And I know I kind of saw it in you a little bit, and we were just like, are you sure you want to do this? You know, maybe you want to take some time, and we let you and your family go into a different room, and you guys came out and you said, nope, not right now. Take me back to that moment.
I think back then I just hadn't really processed yet what I had been through and what I was going through at the moment. So we started talking about judgments and feeling ashamed, and I was ashamed to be ashamed, you know. So there wasn't at that point there wasn't anything that I could really even offer to anybody else, because I hadn't yet processed it within myself. And so now here we are 4 or 5 years later. There's been a book, there's been discussion about it, there's been talking through with the family, you know, and so now it's just a very different space, in a different place to be able to get that story out.
And so at the core of this story was the fact that you were at one point in time a single mother.
Yes.
It wasn't just being a single mother, but it was the fact that you were the firstborn, and I believe I'm quoting your book, but you were the firstborn of an elder and a missionary of one of the holiest of holiest churches, the Kojic Church. And you were like that example in the church. You know, this is whose daughter you should follow.
Definitely.
But you got pregnant.
Yes.
And so for you, what was that like?
Oh, it was probably one of the scariest things.
Why scary?
Of my life. Scary because at that point, like you said, my dad's the elder, my mom's a missionary, grandparents, deacon, and church mother. Like, I've been doing this church thing for a long time, so you know what you're supposed to do. Sunday school, chastity classes, like I've been there, leader of the dance ministry, like, you know this life that you're supposed to live. And so when whatever happens and you end up outside of that life, and even scary, not so much that I was going to be a bad mom or I wasn't going to be able to handle the responsibility, but Sister so-and-so was going to have something to say about the fact that Nyshell was pregnant. And at that time, even before I found out that I was pregnant, I had moved to Atlanta. I was at that age where I was like, I'm about to be grown and free and forget these Kojic folks and all their rules, and I'm about to go and find out what life was really about. And so I had moved away, and I was gone 2 months, and then I found out that I was pregnant. So it was already like, my family is really close-knit, so they didn't want me to go in the first place. They was like, don't go, you might die, like anything could happen, and what are you doing? Right. And then I'm like, I'm going anyway. And I go, and then 2 months later, I'm calling back home, like,
So that's
that's so
on top of.
Yeah. And so then just thinking, like, what are people gonna say? Who's gonna have something to say? Who can't I be friends with anymore? Who's not gonna want to talk to me? And one thing that my dad told me, like, I knew that he was disappointed, and I knew that he had words to say. But one thing that he told me was, a lot of this is going to depend on how harshly you judged other people when they went through things.
Did you harshly judge other?
Unintentionally, yes. I think a lot of times, like, growing up in church or growing up Christian, we get this thing where it's like we find out something about somebody and we're like, she was supposed to be saved. I thought they was saved. Not realizing that, everybody goes through their trials or whatever their vice or their thing might be, and we don't realize until we end up in that predicament that
we're just human and anybody can get there.
Exactly. And I think even through my situation, people were able to find that out, because it was, well, first I was the talk at the beauty shop, but then when those people who were talking about me, when their child ended up pregnant, then well, now you see. Now you see it happens.
So what's different? Because I know you're healed, and I believe the healing process also is constant because it continues to produce fruit. So 4 or 5 years ago, you shut it down. No, our family isn't ready for it. But now you're here, even by yourself. So what's the difference between then and now?
I think really it's just, I guess it would just have to be growth at some point. In trying to figure out how I was going to get through it and what was going to come out of the situation, I started writing. I started doing poetry, and that's when I started kind of opening up about my story and the things that I was feeling. And so through that, I think even my parents reading the book right before it came out, them reading it, they were like, oh, so
this one was really going on.
So this is what was happening. So I just feel like now pretty much everything is out in the open. It's out in the air. And so from that, I've been able to grow, and I believe they've been able to grow too, maybe even change their perspective on how they look at certain things and maybe certain people that they encounter. And I think everybody's just kind of on board of making sure that the story gets out in a way where it will help other people.
Was there at any point that you literally wanted to snap, like just go off on one of the people that you may have trusted or considered a friend? And I say this because even as myself, as a woman of God, having, being active in my church, I'm human, so I make mistakes. And so I try to distance myself to a certain extent, like do not put me on that pedestal, because I can mess up. I have messed up. Y'all just don't know.
Right.
Y'all just don't know.
Right.
And there are times too, but when things kind of build up inside of you because you see other people respond to other folks in a certain way, and like I know I've been on edge, like you got just look at me wrong, So has there ever been a time when you were very close to going off on someone, or when you did, and in a sense you were justified?
I don't think necessarily going off on anyone. There are some people that I've had to just kind of distance myself from for those reasons. There was one lady that I don't know, I guess she was more like a mentor to me, and when I was doing well, when I was winning pageants and doing state competitions and up in front of everybody, she was my big sister and she loved me and we was great, and but once I had my daughter, she wasn't so so I refer to her as Sister Suchy much, but that's somebody that even now where I'm married, and something about me getting married, people figure, oh, she okay now. She's okay now, so we can embrace her and we can be around her again. But I'm still kind of like, well, I'm gonna love you from over here, because
what did the situation, what it being, and I don't even like calling it a situation, but what did What did this experience reveal about yourself first and then about other people? And when I say that, because I believe every experience reveals something about us that we didn't know, you know, good and not so good. So for you, what did that reveal about you?
One thing that it revealed for me was strength. Because a lot of people look at the fact that I was pregnant, and that's not really what the issue was. The issue was sex outside of marriage. The issue was low self-esteem. The issue was, you know, all these things that I dealt with before that result came that people didn't necessarily know about. And so I found out in the situation that I was stronger than what I may have previously thought. You know, I've never had anything that I actually had to overcome like that. So that was proof, and it proves now when I come into tough situations, like you got through that with the help of God, so you can get through whatever else comes your way. But it also showed me how, I guess, dependent I was on what other people thought about me. So a lot of the views that I had about myself weren't necessarily because that's what I felt, that it's just what people have always projected on me.